Welcome to Music from Home, a series of videos created by Yakima Symphony Orchestra members. My name is Sara Mayo, and I am the principal trombonist of the Yakima Symphony, and today we're going to take a look at the nuts and bolts of how an orchestral audition is run and what it's like to be on an audition committee. So, I have looked at the audition screen from both sides now. I've taken a lot of auditions, and I've also been on an audition panel a few times. It's a hiring process that is utterly unlike any other job interview, so I thought we might take a closer look at it today. When an orchestra has an opening, they will announce an audition, typically around 60 days before the actual audition, if not more, and anyone interested sends in a one-page resume that focuses specifically on their performance experience. Depending on the size of the orchestra, they can expect to receive anywhere between 10 and 100 resumes, if not more. Turns out there's a lot of us out there. The orchestra then has to decide how many candidates it can reasonably accommodate. There are some orchestras that really make an effort to listen to as many musicians as possible, and unfortunately those auditions tend to run about 3 or 4 days, which is not really practical for most orchestras or most candidates. So instead, they screen the resumes. The audition committee will receive copies of all the resumes with the names redacted, and they will decide how many candidates they can handle and which ones are the most qualified. They will look at factors like whether or not the musician already holds a position in an orchestra, what groups the candidate may have played with as a substitute musician, whether or not the candidate has been a finalist in other auditions, and various other factors. Candidates whose resumes are accepted are asked for a deposit, and they are given an audition time. Typically, they assign several candidates to each hour, and then each person is given a number when they check in for the actual audition. There's typically about 6 people assigned to each hour. I have seen more, but that gets a little ambitious. During this time, the candidates will also receive the excerpt list. Audition excerpts are taken from the standard orchestral repertoire, and each instrument has a bunch of standard audition excerpts to choose from. Excerpts are usually chosen by the head of the audition committee, who will either be the principal of the section in question or a principal of that instrument family if the audition is for a principal chair. On the day of the audition, the committee will arrive at the hall and usually enter through a different door than the candidates in order to avoid as much contact as possible. They will be seated in the hall, either in the audience or on one side of the stage, with a curtain or screen between them and where the candidates will be. There is also a carpet leading out to the music stand so that the committee can't hear the candidates' footsteps, since certain kinds of shoes make a distinctive sound that can give away the candidate's gender. When I'm on an audition committee, I really don't want to know anything about the candidates other than how they sound. Unlike other job fields, we have a unique advantage in that we can assess someone's skills without knowing anything about their race, their gender, or their appearance in any way. And this allows us to remove as much opportunity for unconscious bias as possible. There have been multiple studies over the years demonstrating just how pervasive unconscious bias is in all of us, and the more we can remove it from the equation entirely, the better. The committee will choose the excerpts for the preliminary round, which is also given to the candidates when they check in. We each have a copy of the excerpts along with pen and paper to take notes. When each candidate enters, they are introduced by number by the audition proctor, who also acts as the direct line of communication between the candidate and the committee so that we never hear their voice. Then they play through the list until they are dismissed. I thought I might demonstrate what a typical prelim round might look like. I've chosen this list as my pretend prelim list. As you can see, it includes a concerto, which is standard in prelims for some instruments and less so for others. It's less standard to have the trombones play the concerto in the prelim of an audition, but we're including it here anyway. Now, typically, an audition happens in the concert hall of the orchestra in question. I do not have access to a concert hall of any kind. What I do have is a tiny Manhattan apartment. so we're doing this in the kitchen.
Thank you. Please move on to the next excerpt.
So, fun fact, the committee doesn't actually have to listen to the entire prelim list. In fact, in most auditions, the majority of candidates will be cut off after only a few excerpts in order to get through the auditions as quickly as possible. Typically, the committee will only listen to the entire list if they think they might advance the musician in question. In addition to dismissing the musician at the end of the audition, the committee may also make requests. They may ask the candidate to play an excerpt again in a different way, either to correct a mistake or to see how quickly the candidate can adjust when given instructions.
Sorry, could I get you to repeat that with a little more aggression?
Did you put some air through the horn?
After each hour, the committee will decide who in that group will advance to the next round. The average is about one person per group, although frequently they will decide not to advance anyone in a group. Very, very occasionally they may advance more than one person in a group, but this is pretty rare. While smaller auditions may only have a prelim and a final round, most auditions also have semifinals. The candidates who advance to semis are given a time and a new list of excerpts, and the semis are run a lot like the prelims, except the committee will typically allow each candidate to play through the whole list rather than cutting them off. There is also a thing called auto-advancing, where a musician who is already well known to the orchestra will be allowed to skip the prelims and go straight to the semis. Since the semis are also screened, they're still playing a blind audition, but this is considered to be sort of a courtesy for musicians who may already play with the orchestra a lot, or who may already be members of the orchestra who are auditioning for a higher chair. There will typically be 2 or 3 candidates who advance to the final round. At this stage, some orchestras will take the screen down at this point, although many will elect to keep the entire audition blind. In addition to the excerpt list, final rounds can also include sight reading excerpts that aren't on the list, or section excerpts for instruments where that makes sense. So you're probably not going to pull an entire cello section on stage for a cello audition, but it is pretty common to have a trombone candidate play a few excerpts with the section to see how they blend with the other players, just to give one example. Finally, after all that, the committee selects a winner and offers them the position. There are sometimes auditions where no winner is chosen, which can happen for a number of reasons. I probably shouldn't get too far into detail about what those reasons are, because then I'm at risk for getting maybe a little too catty about certain orchestras, so let's just leave it at that. If all of this sounds like a horrifying gauntlet of sorrows for the audition candidates, that's because it absolutely is. Auditions are stressful and expensive. Full-time orchestra jobs are incredibly competitive, and even a great musician can play a bad audition if they're having an off day. Ultimately, our job as the audition panel is to make this process go as smoothly as possible so that each candidate can play the most representative performance they can, and then we choose the person who plays the best audition that day. So I hope some of this was interesting, or at least useful, the next time you need to have a conversation with a music performance major about what they're in for. Thanks for joining me, and if you were thinking about auditioning for an orchestra, maybe don't quit your day job just yet.
It's a shame we're not doing the joke reel right now. Thank you.
Move on to the next one, please.
Quickly.